and welcome into the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe, just maybe, you got a moment to sit back, relax, and listen to your favorite podcast. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're at, thanks for being here, and thanks for tuning in, and of course, thanks for telling a friend. I'm your host, Jay, and today's episode is one of the toughest challenges that some dads face. Navigating a high conflict divorce with co-parenting with a toxic ex. If you've been there, you know. If you know, you know. And so it's one of those topics that not everyone, I pray and hope that not everybody has to go through. But if you do, thanks for being here and thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you find some solace in this episode that we're about to get into. So if you've ever felt like the legal system is stacked against you or that you're losing control over your relationship with your kids, well, this conversation is for you. I'm joined by Lisa, the co-founder of Been There, Got Out, a high conflict divorce strategist and certified domestic violence advocate. After going through a brutal legal battle herself, Lisa represented herself in court and won a case that is now being used as legal precedent. She's also played a key role in passing Jennifer's Law, which expands the legal definition of domestic violence to include coercive control. She and her partner Chris help parents in custody battles, co-parenting nightmares, and legal abuse situations. Her book, Been There, Got Out, Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce, and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances, is a must-read for anyone dealing with a difficult ex. So make sure you grab your juice box, grab a snack, and let's jump into the conversation. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay.
Of course, thanks for being here. I'm really excited. So many parents, especially dads, go into a divorce or a custody battle completely unprepared for how high conflict it can be. So I guess kind of to start out here, share a little bit of your story and what led to the books and kind of everything that you're doing now and whatnot.
Okay, that's a huge question, but I'll try. So I was with my ex since I was pretty young, nearly half my life, about 20 years, and never imagined that I would get divorced. We didn't fight that much. Of course, looking back, there's always some red flags that were like, how could you have not seen it? But everyone seems to feel that way. We have two kids together. And then at some point, I started discovering that he had been living a double life for the entire relationship and took a long time to figure out what to do, about 2 years to finally exit the relationship. And one of the things that he kept saying was, if you divorce me, you're going to ruin our kids' lives. So in my head, I had this idea that if I broke up this intact family, my kids' lives would be destroyed. But at some point, lots of therapy, realized that it was probably better to go than to stay and that the kids would somehow be okay. And so I started the divorce process and quickly learned that mine was not what's called a normal divorce, which is when people, everyone's angry at the beginning and then they kind of settle down and realize that the bills are really high and let's kind of go on with our lives and be the best co-parents we can be with our kids. So that's not what happened. The divorce itself took a year and $100,000 that I had to borrow that I'm going to be paying back forever. And then it was about a total of 10 years in the legal system, because during that first year, my lawyer said, your ex is not going to comply with your agreement, even though no judge ordered us to do what we decided, but be ready for it. And so you're going to have to go back to court and you can't afford me anymore because your ex is going to continue to use the legal system to financially decimate you. So about a year and a half-ish, I went back to court because, of course, my ex was not following the agreement, but I was kind of ready for that, never expecting 7 more years and about 100 court appearances in 2 states of having to deal with him and his lawyers. And I couldn't afford a lawyer at that point. So I just represented myself, and everyone around me was kind of like, why is this happening? Like, why doesn't your ex just do what the right thing is for your kids? Like, why is he withholding money from their college? Why doesn't a judge just do the right thing? This is the legal system. And nobody could believe, especially me, that I just continued to deal with someone who didn't comply with something that he agreed to, and courts that just kept saying, well, we'll give it another chance, or let's try this, let's try this. Finally, justice and karma were served beautifully. And then my ex had appealed 4 times. So we went to a higher court. And again, like, I represented myself because I didn't want to spend $20,000 on a lawyer to talk for 20 minutes. about something that I knew better than anything else. And the case was so notable that it got published in the Connecticut Law Journal, which means it became case law for the state, which I always say is this huge honor for any attorney. And I've been told that no one has ever heard of a pro se or self-represented litigant getting that kind of accolade. So I'm always say I'm really proud of that. And so then years later, now Chris and I, my partner, who's the male half of Been There, Got Out, we help men and women all over the world dealing with situations like this, where basically their ex is using the legal system to wear them down and bleed them dry financially, where they feel completely isolated, that they're very successful in other areas of their lives, and they're beating themselves up for getting involved with someone like this because they never expected it. So, yeah, that's essentially what we do. I hope I answered the question.
No, 100%. I loved hearing that story because it's one of those things that you talk to other people that are divorced, right? All the time. But rarely do you get into the nitty-gritty, the intricates of other people's stories and understanding kind of what they went through, being able to hear like $100,000 divorce, right? You think, "Oh, that's not gonna be me, that's not gonna be me. We'll be able to settle this civilly."
Amicably. Yep.
That's the word, thank you. Uh, I had the syllable there, but I'm like, "What's the rest of it?" But we'll be able to settle this civilly, do what's best for the kids, and I think that's the big part, right? Is that you want when kids are involved, you want to do what's best for the kids at the end. You really do. But egos and emotions and hurt and pain can really get in the way.
And mental illness and addiction.
Yeah, that too.
Right.
Those definitely make some big warning signs there. So what so kind of looking back now, looking back on your that relationship a little bit, what were some of the warning signs that this was going to turn into something high conflict?
So I never imagined, I didn't know what high conflict was. I didn't know what narcissism was. I didn't I just, that wasn't part of my world because, like I said, I never imagined getting a divorce. The first time that I ever heard that anything was wrong was during the consult with the divorce attorney who said, yours is going to be bad. And I thought, what do you like? How could a lawyer know that within 20 minutes? Because in my head, I thought my ex was this good person who had just done some bad things. And I thought, of course, at that point, we had both decided that we were going to proceed with the divorce. So why wouldn't this just take a couple months and a few $100s to get it done? And later, I interviewed my attorney before we put out our book, and he gave me several indicators of high conflict divorce. And one of them is when somebody has an addiction or some kind of mental illness where, let's talk about an addiction in particular. When someone has something that's more important to them than anything else, they don't have proper judgment. And so the same thing with a personality disorder. So they're not thinking in their right mind. They're not thinking logically. They're thinking more about short term and not long term consequences. So they won't even do things that benefit themselves because they're so consumed by whatever is, they need at that moment. So that can indicate a high conflict divorce. Someone who's in recovery, totally different story, but someone who has an active addiction or personality disorder, you can't be logical with. So that ends up delaying things. Another thing is financial. So we see people all the time hiding assets, hiding money, or thinking that what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine too. So those are a couple of indicators that were present in my own relationship, someone who's not logical.
Yeah. No, those two K things can be incredibly difficult. Because I mean, going through the divorce process, you can easily find yourself being incredibly selfish, right? Wanting to take, and make any like reprimand for what you feel was wrong by the other person. So if the other person is taking essentially they're not taking anything from you, but if you feel like they're taking quote unquote taking something from you, then you want them to pay you back in some way, shape, or form for that. And that's I think you're spot on there. It's so true. And then, mental illness, personality disorder, someone who doesn't think logically. I mean, divorces are pretty black and white, especially now, more than ever. You go down to the courthouse, you get your stack of papers, you fill them out, turn them in, show up for your hearings, and go home, pretty much.
That's
It,
the fantasy for us in our community. That's
for real. No,
that's the
honestly,
dream.
for real. But it's like, right, that's like, it's a logical process. It's a very logical process. Because I mean, you're filling in the blanks. It doesn't take much, you know. But when someone's not thinking logically, not thinking straight due to a personality disorder, addiction, something underlying, then that can be incredibly difficult. For you in your situation,
Yeah. So let me get into like why people do things like that and what it looks like. So, like I said, a normal separation or divorce, people are angry, they settle down, they want to go on with their lives. But post separation legal abuse, it happens because in these different situations where there is a personality disorder or an addiction, instead of wanting to go on and move away and go on separately, it's the opposite. That person wants to stay engaged with you as long as possible because they require your attention. So the divorce process, which is supposed to separate you, is what they don't want. And so they do the opposite. So instead of going down to the courthouse and filling out papers, they'll be like, I'm not doing anything. Like, you can't leave. This is not going to end. And so what happens is, during the divorce process, there's something called discovery or disclosure, which is when everyone shows what they have financially. And then whoever, whether it's a mediator or a judge, is going to split things, they know what they have to split. But someone who doesn't cooperate with the process, which is what we see all the time, they don't want to supply the information. And so it makes it impossible to move forward with going on with your life. And so it becomes extremely frustrating and expensive because you want to try to work things out outside of court. My ex used to show up to mediation with a blank legal pad. He'd say, instead of, so I'd have all my credit card statements, the tax returns, whatever. He'd be like, oh, you already know what I have. I didn't know what he had because I found out later, like, he had been hiding all kinds of things from me. Plus, he had 14 rental properties that he shared with his sister that he always kind of kept separate. He'd have things sent to a different address without telling me and making it seem like there was this whole other thing that was like with his sister. But in the tax returns that we were doing, I didn't realize that I was signing things that included stuff with those properties. So all kinds of nonsense with money is part of post-separation legal abuse. And if you're up against someone like that, you're paying a lawyer to file subpoenas to get that information when it could be so much cheaper if they just showed up and, like you said, like at the court with the paperwork, and it can just get done. So that's something that makes it really, really hard. And obviously, paying lawyers in our country, in America, is super expensive. Like, I'm in New York, Connecticut, and lawyers tend to be $600 to $1,200 an hour. Think about all the time that it takes for someone to go through records and to chase after documents, to prepare for trial. Trial itself, when you're in court, a lot of times you're not in front of the judge doing your thing, you're waiting around. So it's just, like we always say, they want to wear you down and bleed you dry financially, so you just give up and give in. And that's what post separation legal abuse looks like. Also, in our cases, people say that they're going to change custody. So there's always this threat hanging over their heads, like, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to take the kids, or I'm going to make it as though you're an unfit parent. And so dealing with all kinds of false allegations, whether that person is filing motions against you, or like in my case, where I had to keep going back to court to try to get an order enforced, all of that is considered legal abuse. It's also known as litigation abuse, judicial terrorism, or stalking through the court. Because once you get out of that physical relationship, we always say that your ex is limited to 3 ways to still get at you: money, kids, and the court. And money and the court go hand in hand, and the kids are the thing that they really get you with. And that's the topic of the book that we're working on now, which is how to handle when your ex is trying to turn the kids against you. Because that's something that we see. It's almost baked into legal abuse. It's like, if we're not in court, I'm going to be whispering things into your kids' ears so that they think that you're the bad person.
yeah, and that's unfortunate too. Um, you the legal abuse, the money, they go hand in hand, right? The courts, the money, they go hand in hand. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to get more, and no one wants to pay anything. No one wants to
Right.
pay up their portion that they're being told to pay up by the courts, because it's fair, it's unfair, it's damaging their image, especially to a narcissist or someone that's really gonna tear them down, because it's essentially telling them that everything they've been doing is wrong, when in their world, everything that they do is right and perfect.
Mhm.
And so that really tears them down and destroys them, especially because they think that they're in the right all the time, and they do nothing wrong. And so that makes it really difficult. Speaking of kids and whatnot, it's really easy to see a manipulated situation, right? To where the kids are part of the manipulation, where co-parenting becomes a battle in itself. The time, the money, the effort, the getting kids back and forth is very easy to manipulate the system for kids, make false allegations, false CPS calls, say, "Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, look, red mark," kinda thing, "I just picked them up, and now look, they have red marks," and things like that, or they said they didn't eat for 3 days, or whatever kinda thing, and just file all this BS, when it's easier just to talk to the other person and say, "Hey, this here's the kid fabricating this," kinda thing. But kids are also incredibly impressionable, like, very, very impressionable. So, what if from what you've done, your work and whatnot, what's the best way to handle, the constant manipulation, the co-parenting battles?
That's a is a huge question. So people always get really scared because often our clients are always the ones who, they're what we call the protective parents. Like they love their kids, they're worried about their kids and their kids' safety. And so when they're dealing with someone who, is the other parent, but they've been the primary caretaker or they've been closer to the child, and then they have to share custody and they start sensing that something is wrong where their kids are coming back and saying, Dad said this about you, or Mom said this about you, like this terrible thing, and then they want to defend themselves and say that's not true, like why would you ever think something like that, and it's like they see their children start to get a little bit brainwashed against them. That is absolutely terrifying. Like nobody ever imagines that a child that they loved and raised, that they were close to, would ever think bad things about them. But when this starts happening, by trying to defend yourself, it doesn't work because kids kids think that both parents love them and that their parents are authority figures and both parents tell them the truth. So when one parent says something and the other parent says the opposite, they're like, what, who am I supposed to believe? So really one of the best protections that you can do is, it's not a quick easy thing, but it's establishing a close relationship with your child so that when they start, not, and I'm not saying if, when they start hearing these messages about you that you're unsafe, unloving, and or unavailable, they have their own reality where they're like, no, that's not really true because Mom or Dad, like we've spent time together. Mom and Dad, Mom or Dad has really like invested their attention in me, and when I go over to their house, they really focus on me and they play games with me together, or I can talk to them and I know it's not true. Helping a child develop critical thinking skills and spending, I always say, like, it's something called the 10-minute rule. Like when you're with your child, even if you're not divorced, if you want to have a really close relationship, try to spend at least 10 minutes a day with that child, like completely focused on something that they want to do. I mean, not something ridiculous, but even if it's not something that you want to do, like if they want to play a new video game, get down on their level and say, hey, I see you're doing that. Like, can you show me how this works? Can you teach me how to do something? Like, that's the way that you establish close relationships with your children so that when this happens, and the other parent starts saying bad things about you, the child doesn't just believe it because they're like, no, I know that Mom or Dad isn't like that because that's not my experience with this person. So that's like a good way to prevent it, because a lot of kids are told bad things about the other parent, but not every kid falls prey to believing it.
And that's exactly what you need, right? You 100% need to spend that time with your kids so that they don't believe it, right? So that they aren't falling victim to the manipulation, because who knows their kids better than their parents, right? And they know how to manipulate them. They know how to get them to think one way. And it's really easy to get our kids to think that way, and it's also really damaging to them, right? Because yes, a lot of kids go through divorce, but at the same time, kids still need both their parents. You can't just break those relationships off, and it's not fair to when a dad goes from being involved 100% of the time to then being a weekend warrior kind of thing
Exactly.
and getting the weekends kind of thing to where 'cause there's nothing that's showing that that's necessary. There's nothing that's showing that that's needed. This dad's very capable, has all the things he needs. There should be no reason whatsoever. Other than that, it's just another form, I think, of that legal abuse to where it's like, well, I'm going to take the kids from you. I'm going to keep the kids from you. You're only going to get them for
Hmm.
this long. I'm going to file to keep them more. You're not going to get them as often, kind of thing. And that's really tough. That will destroy someone's psyche really quickly.
And that's so common what you've just described. We see that all the time. And we interviewed a lawyer in Colorado named Evan Fair. She used to be a sheriff, and then she was also a child protective services worker, and now she's an attorney. And she said that right now she feels like is one of the most dangerous time for men and stepfathers, for fathers and stepfathers, because of false allegations. And we see this all the time because when someone makes an allegation, it takes time to be investigated. And a lot of times, judges or people involved with the child, like an attorney for the child or someone who's doing a custody evaluation, they want to be on the safe side. So when they do that investigation, often you're not allowed to be near your kid. And then it just turns into this longer process where you end up having to defend yourself against something that's not true a lot of the time. And it's really terrifying for for men in particular. We have had women clients who have been accused of sexual abuse. One of our clients was in jail for 2 years on false allegations of sexual abuse. There's so much involved. It's not just the impact that it has on how could my child be part of this kind of false allegation, but how it affects you as a human being, the smear campaigns, the fear about your job. Sometimes people end up losing their licenses depending on what their job is as this investigation is happening. Because even though we say you're not innocent until proven guilty, when certain types of allegations come out, people already assume that it's true, and it's really terrifying where a lot of men in particular can get depressed and suicidal.
Yeah. And a lot of men end up losing their jobs, and because they're just spending so much time in court, they're being drugged through this process where they just wanna honestly, men just wanna a lot of men just wanna go home. They just wanna sign where they gotta sign, pay what they gotta start paying, and just be done. Do what they gotta do to just be done, and that's from the very beginning to just be done. And you mentioned, the kids and the false allegations and how detrimental this is, and yes, we should believe people when things happen, and it happens on both sides, right? It happens to men, it happens to women, but it disproportionately happens to men. I wanna say the 80-20 rule is applicable here, but it's more like a 90-10, I think, in reality, whereas 90% men are affected by it, 10% women are affected by it. But I could be totally wrong on that. 80-20 specifically to the ones that you mentioned. I think there's other ones that, that can be easily flipped. There's other ones that could be more 50-50, but specifically the allegations that you mentioned, the abuse, the what's the word I'm thinking of here?
Well, I'm
The
thinking
manipulation.
that particular kind of abuse is generally men are accused of it way more often than women are.
Yeah. And so, like you're saying here, it's one of those things that you want to believe the people, you want to believe the person saying it, but you also have to look at the whole context, right? Like, is this mother just saying that because they're going through a divorce all of a sudden? Has this ever happened before? Has there ever been any allegations of this ever before? I mean, you have to look at the whole picture. And like I said, a lot of people will just quickly jump to assumptions and will believe the worst case, which isn't fair. You know, there's there's plenty of legal cases that we see about how people are falsely accused of sexual misconduct, sexual assault in all these ways. The Me Too movement, really charged that up. I know that's something controversial to say, but I'm fine with it. I'm saying it. So, it's difficult. It's sad to see because a lot of dads will again, that's just another way to defeat someone, right? To pull them down and, essentially ruin their lives. And that's not what the process should be like. It shouldn't be about ruining lives. Your marriage didn't work out, plain and simple. Maybe someone cheated, maybe someone did something bad, but at the same time, those mistakes shouldn't carry into your kids and the relationship that they have with the other parent, unless something specifically did happen to them. But it's never okay for a kid to lose their parent to false allegations, spend 2 years in prison, like you mentioned, but then coming out of that, how do they get a job? Like, take care of themselves and do all the normal things. Like, their life isn't normal anymore after that. And so it's gonna be even harder for them to see their kids. And why would you wish that on any child? That's not okay.
I know, and it happens all the time because those because being a high conflict divorce strategist, like these are the cases that we deal with only all the time, and people whose lives are, you know, often affected by false allegations, different kinds of abuse allegations. So men are often accused, not often, but in the situation percentage wise, men are accused of that type of abuse more than women. But women are often targeted as being like an unfit mother. And so people lie on both sides. Like legal abuse is 50-50. Like everyone lies in court. We've interviewed police officers who say they spend their day talking to liars. Like most of the time when people are reporting stuff, it's false. And that's why things have to be investigated, but that always takes time. And that's the part that can feel so unfair is when somebody lies and then you have to wait for justice. How do you live during that time? How do you live knowing that you've been lied about and all of these unfair things are happening? And that's why it can sometimes become harder for people in these situations because they're so angry that when they are presenting to an evaluator or an officer of the court who's trying to make a determination, that anger gets in the way. And that's what people see first. We talk about something called the 7-38-55% rule. And that's when you're communicating with someone, they're only paying attention to 7% of your words. They're paying attention to 38% of your tone. And oh my gosh, what did I just say? 57% is your body language. Um, it's a lot of it is in your presentation, and if you are sending out like fury and anger, even though it's justified, you're going to make a bad impression. And that's why it's so important for people to work with professionals who can help them learn to present properly to experts and not just let their emotions take over. But it's really really hard.
Yeah, because those emotions are what's fueling you, right? That's essentially your fuel in all this. Some of that fight to keep going, especially when it gets like tougher and tougher. Those false allegations happen. You're trying to live with, someone that you. I think the hardest part here that for anyone and where the emotions come from is you want to think the absolute best of this person, right? That you were with, that you loved for many, many years, probably, and had children with, and started a whole life and family with, right? But then to know that they're lying about you and accusing you of stuff that you both know that you never did. And now
Mhm.
all of a sudden they're the ones accusing you of that. That's just that's just harsh. That's just hard. It's really hard because you're like, how could you? Are you serious? You know. Like we were together for how long? But you know that I would never, that I'm not like that. That that's not me at all. You know that's not part of my character at all. But then just this character assassination happens. These
Exactly.
narratives, right? That victimhood. It's like, "Oh, I need to have everyone I need to be the victim so everyone takes my side on this," kinda thing. And, sees my side as I'm the one that was hurt the most, right? And everyone just wants to show that they were hurt the most, that they had the most damages against them, that they're hurting more, and so they need, this retribution financially or whatever it is, or I'm less well off now kinda thing. Uh, and not from, what I see in my experience, working with different families and whatnot, uh, from a different angle of all this is that, you know, not a lot of people wanna take the accountability for their part. They wanna point the other finger outwards or versus pointing it inwards and say, "Well, I didn't, not no, not me, never not me," when that's false most of the time because, yes, 100% you. You caused part to this. It takes 2 to tango, takes 2 people to get divorced. But, there's a lot of accountability that has to be taken. So, are there any, like, mistakes that are made in how people are talking to their ex that can backfire in court?
Oh yeah. So one of the biggest mistakes that people do is in their co-parenting communication. We call it popping off, where they lose their temper and they attack their ex. And it's documented. And I'm not just talking about recordings, because I'm always thinking court. Like a lot of times courts don't like recordings, except maybe for certain domestic violence issues, which are separate from custody issues unless it affects the child directly. And that's a whole other topic. But a lot of people communicate post separation in an app or in text or an email, and they'll get really angry. And then it's preserved in writing. And that makes it very difficult for them to appear like a healthy co-parent. And so one of the things that Chris and I do with people is teach strategic communication, where we say you are writing to your ex, but you are writing for that invisible audience. You're under the court's microscope all the time. And anything that you write, just imagine reading it out loud in court, because it could always turn into an exhibit. And so it's important to remember to restrain yourself, but to still get out what you need to say, but not necessarily to send it to your ex, or to pause before you send things. And one of the perks we have for our clients is we call it the permission slip plan. I used to be a high school English teacher, so we use a lot of education metaphors. But we'll say, when you think you want to say something, like write it down. And we teach strategic communication. Write us a draft, send it to us first, and we will proofread and edit it for you, because we want you to have clean hands and for the record to be clean. And that way you don't have the burden of having to do it yourself. And this keeps you from popping off. And so this way it forces people to pause, and then they have to wait. They have to wait for us to answer. And we always do it, usually in less than a day. But by just taking the time to like simmer down a little bit, it makes their communication look a lot better. And also it's better for the ex receiving it, because it's thoughtful and it's strategic. And one of the best exhibits that you can ever give when you're back in court is your correspondence with your ex. That becomes part of the record. So it's such an opportunity to present yourself as someone who's just trying to work with that other person. Because in terms of it takes two to tango, if you are like engaging with your ex, which is what a lot of toxic exes want, they don't care about whether it's positive or negative attention. They just want to have your attention. So if they can fight, they'll want you to fight. So we want to like rein you back in and say, let's not look bad to other people. And there's ways to do it. And there's ways to also get your ex's voice out of your head. One of the best ways is through strategic communication. We actually just released a course last month called How to Communicate with Your Ex Without Destroying Your Case or Losing Your Mind, since that seems to be the way that the person still terrorizes you through the kids, through the communication about the kids. So it's really, really important to learn how to communicate strategically, knowing that other people are going to be looking at what you said and the impression that you make to those people.
100%. And I think that's so important, right? Like your ex will always look for every opportunity to tear you down during the process, right? And even after, they always
Oh,
want to have
yeah.
a gotcha moment. I'm like 5 going on 6 years post my divorce and whatnot, and there's still like attempts to do gotcha moments, kind
Hmm.
of things like that. Start shit. Like there was just something I want to say it's within the last 2 weeks to where no, it was like last week. So yeah, within the last 2 weeks to where my oldest daughter has spring break this week, and she's going to be with me for spring break. And recording this in April, so if this comes out well after April, then here's some context. So it's spring break this week, and she has like multiple days off. My oldest daughter wanted to stay with her, and I said no. She's gonna be over here, and she's gonna do what I already planned for her. She's gonna go to YMCA. She's gonna go to her break camp and do these things. She has a day with her friends planned already too, and stuff. Like she's gonna be fine. I didn't tell her all that. I'm like, no. Answer is no. She's coming here. She's gonna do what I already planned for her, and that's it. And my ex, of course, you know, saw an opportunity to say, well, you're being really controlling because guys kind of her tune. And so, we're many years removed from all this, and this probably wasn't very strategic. So, just to make an example, right? She's still looking for those things and those opportunities to say something, to start something, to stoke the flames a little bit. And I just said, look, this isn't a discussion that I'm going to have with you because I already have a plan. So she's going to be with me, and then she tried to bring up all these things, like, and just continue to stoke the flames, saying that well, legally, if I'm home, doesn't she have to come to me? I'm like, no, she has childcare, so that's already set up. Like, you're the last option, and all these things, and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, when she called me controlling, it's like that's very controlling. I mean, like, look, you need to change your tune. You've been saying the same thing for 5 years now. How about you find something different? And then it was end of conversation after that. She didn't respond. She has no
Yeah.
response when she's called out.
Right, right. So the thing I always think of is like, well, what's the access schedule? Like, it's not about controlling or not, it's whose parenting time is it,
Exactly. It's my
right?
parenting time,
That's
and
it.
she's gonna go where I
Yeah.
tell her to go. She's
Yeah.
7. Right? Like, she's 7, and that's what I told her. I'm like, "She's 7. She doesn't get to pick and choose where she goes every single day and what she does. She's here, and she does what I say. When she's with you, she goes where you tell her to go. End of
Right.
story.
Right.
Like, if I
Because
really
each
need
of
you, I'll
you
let you
are
know."
her parents. Like each of you have your rights and you have your responsibilities.
Yeah, and so then she just, continue to try to manipulate. It's like, "Well, now she's not gonna have a fun spring break, and she's gonna be stuck going there." I'm like, "She's gonna have a plenty fun spring break. Trust me. Anyways, do you actually need something, or are you done?" Kinda thing, and then it's just end of conversation after that. So, there are finer tuned ways to do that. Like I said, it's 5 years post everything, so it's a little bit easier to, you know, get away with that because I know she's not gonna do anything. Our situation is very different. Like, I know she's not gonna go and do anything, um, and whatnot. So it's one of those. But my advice is to always, keep it short, sweet, to the point, and do your absolute best. It can be strategic, yes, but also if you don't there is an opportunity, there's always opportunities to just not respond. You don't always have to respond to everything. You can ignore the other person. It's totally fine. Guess what? Ignoring is just gonna make them more mad because essentially if the other person's attacking you, at least from my experience, from what I know, is that they're attacking you because they want to engage you. They wanna get you to react. They wanna get you to respond. They wanna get you to essentially pop off at them. So they're antagonizing. The more you ignore them, the more that's gonna cause them to in turn pop off because they just can't function without having that control over you and being able to say and manipulate you to that point to where you pop off and they get the satisfaction.
Right. Right. And they say, look at how abusive you are.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
we don't want
Yep.
that to
Yep.
happen.
No, and it's turned instantly back on you. And then you're like, wait, you were the one that was antagonizing me kind of thing. And that antagonization does come through kids a lot of time too, because they'll tell the kids to tell you something specific that'll set you off, that'll get you to then engage them, to then again get you to look bad. Um, and honestly, the kids need to just, stay out of it the most they can. When you involve them or overly involve them in all this stuff, it's really bad for them. It's really bad for them because they're too young to understand all the intricacies and what you're doing. They wanna, of course, help mom and dad. They wanna, do the things that you tell them because they wanna love you, and now they're going in this new situation, and they're trying to adjust, and they wanna love everybody, and they don't wanna pick a side, but you're forcing them to pick a side, and that's not fair to them. Just let
Exactly.
the kids like, kids should 100% be left out of it. Here in the state of Washington on the court papers, it actually says that if there's anything negative said, that can be held, that can be filed and against the other person as a contempt of court. Like, if there's any of those things that are actively happening with the kid, being told to the kids that are, like, found out about or whatnot, that can hold the other person as a contempt of court.
Yeah. So there's something called the non-disparagement clause that's pretty standard in a lot of separation or divorce agreements that says that each parent is never supposed to badmouth or etc.
Yeah,
say
yeah.
bad things to give the child a bad impression of that parent because it is so harmful. The problem is it's hard to enforce that clause because it's like, okay, they said this one thing about me. Are you going to pay however much to go to court and have a lawyer say it to a judge? And then what are you going to ask the judge to do? Are you going to ask for the person to pay your legal fees? Are you going to ask for more custody time? Are you going to say that that person needs to be on supervised visitation because they made this one comment? So when you're going to build a case like that, it's really important to understand what we call the alienation factors, which relate to that or disparagement clause actually, so that you can build a case effectively based on those factors and figure out what relief to ask the court for, like what consequences, because it's hard to build one of those cases and you can't usually do it on like a 1 or 2 time incident. We always say it's about showing through strategic communication your ex's patterns of behavior over time and the direct impact it has on your child and on your relationship with your child. See, we often say, like, one of the most important custody factors or best interest factors is which parent is likely to support the child's relationship with the other parent. And that flip side is what we've been talking about. Is one parent attempting to undermine your relationship with your child because it's recognized how unhealthy it is? Like, these are your kids' primal attachments. And if somebody is trying to sever one of those significant attachments to a parent, that could affect the child's attachment, their relationships for the rest of their lives. That can create
100%.
unhealthy attachment patterns. So you don't want to let that happen. But we always want to do what we can outside of court, because courts, it's so nuanced and it's so subtle that courts often don't know what to do with it, except in extreme cases where it's already the kids doesn't want to talk to you anymore or is afraid of you and there's no justification. So it's really complex.
Yeah, 100%. So are there any, like, legal steps that someone can take if they feel that their relationship is essentially being poisoned or that alienation's happening?
Yeah, so I would say the most obvious one, and this is from interviewing several attorneys, is when your ex starts violating your parenting schedule. So let's say you have, like we just talked about before, you have your access time with the kids, your parenting time, your ex has their parenting time, and then somehow it starts becoming, oh, the kid doesn't want to see you. Oh, they have other activities, basically to make it as though your relationship isn't as important. And then you start
Yeah,
losing that precious time with your kids, which is, I don't even need to say why it's so important. That's a sign when somebody starts violating a parenting plan, you want to go to court pretty quickly and tell a judge to make sure to enforce it or to ask for sanctions or whatever it is, attorney's fees. But that's the first sign generally when they really start trying to cut the child off. We say they're blocking contact and communication. That's very easy for the court to see. The other stuff, it can take a while longer, but always watch for when your ex starts violating the parenting schedule.
okay, okay. So kinda jumping into just some, like, little advice questions here. So you successfully represented yourself in scores of court cases, right? So is there any specific advice that you would have for someone considering going pro se?
Yeah, so with pro se, it's hard. It's not something you just do. And if you're in the middle of a divorce or an initial custody situation, first of all, you always need a lawyer in the background at the very least, because you want to make sure that you follow proper procedure. I mean, lawyers go to law school, they know the ins and outs of law. We don't. So you need to make sure that you follow proper procedures so that your case doesn't just get thrown out on some kind of technicality. And the second most important thing is, it's better to do, to have a lawyer more involved for the initial divorce or custody issue, because once you get an agreement or some kind of order, that's the basis of everything else. And that makes it easier to go pro se, because then it's more limited. But for the initial thing, I'd always recommend having a lawyer handle the bulk of that if you can afford it. And the second thing is emotional detachment. It's so hard because this case is your life and you're up against, if your ex has a lawyer, they don't, this is just business to them. And there's something called court demeanor, and you need to know how to behave yourself. And one thing in court is you have to be as calm as possible and as objective as possible. That can be so hard with these emotional cases. So if you still are really emotional, it's not a good idea to go pro se.
What are some of the mistakes that you made kinda looking back on everything that could have hurt you and may hurt someone else going forward?
I use my attorney as a therapist. That's why the bills went up so high. Another thing that people waste tons of money on, that both Chris and I did, that we have now saved our clients loads of money on, is using lawyers to communicate for you and using lawyers to negotiate for you. How much money gets wasted in back and forth negotiations where your ex is constantly moving the goalposts? And that's why it's so important to learn how to do more things yourself, because lawyers are generally not trained in communication and that's not their job. I think people come in and make the mistake that their lawyer is their everything. And that's just going to cost you loads of money and you're not going to get the best service. So learning which resources to use for specific things. We always talk about something called taking strategic oversight, which is like running your case like a business, being like the lawyer stays in the legal lane, the therapist stays in that lane, friends and family have their own lane. And then Chris and I kind of fill the gaps between what attorneys are trained to do and therapists don't understand.
Interesting. Okay. Um, what so if someone can't afford a lawyer for even any of the process, what's their is there any like best option that they
Yeah.
have available to them?
Yeah. So most courthouses have something called a pro se help desk or some kind of volunteer lawyer program where you can go in and sometimes you sign up, sometimes you could just walk in and usually lawyers will be there and they'll give you like 20 to 45 minutes of legal advice. They won't take on your case, but they could at least like help you figure out what angle to do legally. There's always people at a courthouse who could help you fill out forms. So I would definitely start there. There's also something called Legal Shield, which we recommend to a lot of our clients who can't afford attorneys, where it's like, I think it's $29 a month, and they partner you with a law firm that won't take on your case, but can give basic legal advice, and you get up to 15 hours. So for $29 for 15 hours of law, like before you get started, I would definitely recommend spending the $30 and getting like the basics.
And then I guess just what is one piece of advice that you would just offer to any parent preparing to go to family court and go through this whole process?
Well, so we are in the world of high conflict, and nobody imagines that theirs could be high conflict because at the beginning I said everyone is angry. Anyone going through this needs a team of support. Like you cannot do it yourself. And this is one thing that we see with our clients who tend to be like the sweetest, kindest, most successful, empathic, creative, responsible people who have been shouldering the world themselves already, being in one of these kinds of relationships because they were targeted for their amazingness. And so they often resist asking for help because they feel like, oh, I should be able to do it myself. Like, look, I'm doing everything else myself. This is not a time to go independent. Like, you need support because that's going to affect everything moving forward with your child. Like the better support you have as a parent, the better you can parent your child, where your child's not going to be worried about helping regulate you emotionally because they see you upset. Having that support is going to help you be as calm and get through this as smoothly as possible because it's not going to be easy, but it'll make you a better parent and hopefully, will not make your child subject to intergenerational trauma. Because if you're okay, your child's going to be okay.
I love that. All right, are you ready to jump into the dad zone with me?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. Proper transition. Nailed it. So the dad zone is just some fun, lighthearted questions. We had a very serious conversation. I like to have a little fun here at the end, because as dads do, we're serious for a little bit, and then we have to have some fun. We only can be serious for so long. But that was seriously just a great conversation. I think there's a lot of great nuggets in there for people to take away, especially going through these situations, and to really not feel as alone. So I absolutely love the conversation we had today. So first question here in the dad zone: does pineapple go on pizza?
Absolutely. Pineapple and ham, Hawaiian pizza.
Interesting. Okay. To each their own. That's okay. Like I said, this was still such a great conversation that I will still air this episode, even though you answered that question less than ideal. I'll still air it. That's okay. Who are three people, dead or alive, that you would invite to a dinner party?
My God. All right, Judge Lynn Toller. I love her. She used to be on Divorce Court. She's amazing. And let me think. Saul Williams is the slam poet who I always admired, and my partner Chris because he's super funny and makes everyone laugh.
I love it. I love it. And then what is your guilty pleasure food?
Breyer's mint chocolate chip ice cream, not the fake dairy stuff, like the real mint chocolate chip. I could sit there and eat like an entire tub myself. That's what my dad used to do when I was growing up, and I probably shouldn't, but I could.
I love it. And then last question of the dad zone here. What is one piece of advice that you would offer to a young parent, 18 to 22 years old, that's just starting out on their parenting journey?
I hope you get some sleep The sleep deprivation is the worst, and sometimes it can take like 3+ years, but it'll get better. And good for you that you have a child while you're still so young, because it's going to take so much energy, and you can be a young parent.
100%. Yeah. No, I don't see anything wrong with being a young parent. I mean, maybe I'm biased. I became a dad at like 21, 22. So I spent all of my 20s being a dad, not really doing anything else. So it keeps you grounded too. Like for men, if if you do end up having a child in your early 20s, I don't think it's bad for you at all because it definitely keeps you grounded. It keeps you sane and it keeps you um focused on the right things versus the wrong things. Same for
Got
a
the
mom.
energy. You've got the energy that you need to take care of babies, because they exhausting.
A lot, true. Well, Lisa, this has been nothing less than an eye-opening conversation. I learned a lot myself as well. And I know a lot of parents, dads specifically listening, are going to feel more prepared and more in control of the situation after hearing this. Or maybe there will be parents who are like, "Oh, you know what? I'm in a red flag situation. I need to take some control of this. And I need to do something, talk to someone, something like that." For those who need guidance, coaching, or legal strategies, they can connect with you. Where, or I guess, where is the best place to connect with you?
So we are pretty active and engaged on social media. Instagram is my home base. We're also on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. If you just look up "been there, got out," like the on Instagram, it's at "been there, got out" with little underscores. But our website is beentheregotout.com. Our first book is "Been There, Got Out." The one we're working on now is also "Been There, Got Out." It's just got a different subtitle about, how to handle when your ex is turning the kids against you. But we're everywhere. We have a podcast. We have a YouTube channel. Just look up "Been There, Got Out," and we're super easy to reach. And it's just Chris and I, so we will always answer you ourselves.
Love it. That's amazing. Well, Lisa, this has been great. Listeners, make sure you go and check out beentheregotout.com. I'm sure that's in all the socials are connected to the website as well. Perfect. Perfect. So, listeners, if you found this episode helpful, please share it with another parent, another dad who might need this info today. And as always, subscribe, leave a review, and stay tuned for more great guests. And until next time, keep showing up, keep fighting for your kids, and of course, take care of yourself too. And that's